Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will learn Tosfos Dibur Maschal P'turi Da'asil Dechi of Chatas. Let's begin by looking at the flowchart so we can see what part of the Gemara Tosfos is coming to explain. So here in the Gemara, we had a question. Why is it that the Tana of the Mishnah says Yitzias HaShabbos Shtayim Shenarba B'fnim U'Shtayim Shenarba B'chutz, that there's a total of 8 cases of Yitzias HaShabbos, but then he goes on to actually count 12 cases, and we answered that P'turi Da'asil B'hil Dechi of Chatas Kachashav, the Pater cases that bring to a Chi of Chatas, he counts. The Pater cases that do not bring to a Chi of Chatas, like a Chashav, it doesn't count. In other words, 4 of the 12 cases are Pater and Asr that do not bring to a Chi of Chatas, and therefore they're not counted in the original number of 8 at the beginning of the Mishnah. So let's start the Tosfos with a general outline. We explained that our Mishnah only counts the Pater cases that bring to a Chi of Chatas. You divide the Tosfos into 2 parts. Number 1 is Tosfos will present the explanation of Rashi for what these cases are. What are the cases of Asr that are Asi Behuli Dechi of Chatas, and Tosfos will challenge this explanation. And the second part is Tosfos will then present an alternative explanation for what these cases are and bring a proof for it. So let's see the Tosfos in the flowchart. We explained that our Mishnah only counts the cases of Pater that are Asi Behuli Dechi of Chatas, that through them the person comes to a Chi of Chatas. Tosfos says, what Rashi explained, that these are the cases that the person did in Akira. Rashi says that Asi Behuli Dechi of Chatas are the other cases where the person did the Akira. So let's see what those cases are. We'll see it for the Balabayas. So we have case 1 for the Balabayas. Says he did the Akira. Not only did he do the Akira, he also extended his hand outwards. And then the Ani completed the Malacha. Case 2 for the Balabayas is where all he did was the Akira, and the Ani is the one that completed the Malacha. So according to Rashi, those are the cases of Asr, of the Balabayas, that are Asi V'hu L'Dei of Chatas, that bring to a Chi of Chatas. And the explanation is that the person who started the Malacha, whether he did the, let's look for a moment at the Balabayas, whether he did the Akira and he extended it outwards, or he just did the Akira, that's the beginning of the Malacha, and through that he could come to completing the Malacha. However, we're not going to count the cases of the Balabayas where he just finished off the Malacha for the Ani, for the poor man, since there he can't come to a Chi of Chatas. Tosfos has 3 questions on this explanation of Rashi. Reed doesn't agree with this for the following 3 reasons. Number 1, just an Akira without anything more doesn't amount to anything. Tosfos says that it doesn't seem right to say that the person, let's look at the Balabayas, who did the Akira is considered Asi Behul Dechi of Chatas, because then you need to include the case where all he did was lift it up, and that we can't say is Asi Behul Dechi of Chatas because he barely did any part of the Malacha. All he did was lift it up. Number 2, Tosfos says, according to this, it comes out that not each individual has 2 cases of Eitzah and 2 of Achnasa, but rather the Balabayas has 3 cases of Eitzah and 1 of Achnasa, and the Ani has 3 cases of Achnasa and 1 of Eitzah. Let's see how that works out. So the Ani has 1 case of completely doing the Achnasa, then he has another case where he did 2 parts of the Achnasa, and then he has a 3rd case where all he did was the first part of the Achnasa, the Akira. And then he has 1 case where he did the whole Eitzah. The Balabayas has 3 cases of Eitzah. 1 where he did the whole Eitzah, all 3 parts. 1 where he did just the Akira and extending his hand outwards, the first 2 parts. And then 1 where he just did the Akira. And for Achnasa, all he has is 1 case where he did the entire thing. So it's not divided in a way that it's even. And the 3rd point that Tosfos has, why he doesn't agree with Rashi, is when we look at the Mishnah and the Reisha, first it counts 2 cases for the Ani, and then 2 cases for the Balabayas. First it says if the Ani did the whole Malacha of Achnasa, or the whole Malacha of Eitzah. And then it mentions if the Balabayas did the whole Malacha of Eitzah, or the whole Malacha of Achnasa. So in the ratio, we separate the Ani case from the Balabayas case. However, according to Rashi in the Sefer, we end up mixing the cases of the Ani together with the Balabayas. Because the Mishnah says, in the 5th and 6th case, if the Ani lifted up his hand and extended it inwards, and then the Balabayas took something out of it, that's a case of the Ani, because the Ani did the Akira according to Rashi. Or the Balabayas put something into it and the Ani took it out. That's a case of the Balabayas, because the Balabayas is the one that put something into the hand of the Ani. The Balabayas did the Akira, so it mixes the cases together. So for these 3 reasons, the Ri says he doesn't agree with Rashi. Rather, the Ri presents the Riva explains differently. That brings to a Chi of Chatas refers to the person who makes the transfer from one rishus to another, and he is part because he is missing the Akira Anacha. Let's explain that for a moment. Riva says that Asi Behul Dechi of Chatas is referring to the person that has the item in his hand and moves it either outwards into Rishus HaRabim or inwards into Rishus HaYachid, because that's the Malacha of Eitzah, transferring and Achnasa, transferring from one Rishus to another. The Anacha and Akira are the conditions that are needed. In order for a person to be chayiv for the Malacha of Eitzah or Achnasa, he needs it to be complete also with the Akira and the Anacha. But ultimately the Malacha is transferring from one Rishus to another. By explaining it this way, all 3 questions on Rashi fall aside. Number 1, we said that how can we say that just an Akira is considered Asi Behul Dechi of Chatas when an Akira is barely anything? According to this explanation, Asi Behul Dechi of Chatas is the person that transferred from one Rishus to the other. That's a significant act. Question number 2 was that it comes out that they don't each have 2 cases. According to this explanation, they each do have 2 cases of Hitzah and Achnasa. Let's look at the Ani. The Ani has one case of Hachnasa when he brought it in entirely himself, and one case of Eitzah where he took it out entirely himself. And then he has an additional 2 cases, one of Eitzah and one of Hachnasa. The one of Hachnasa is when he lifted up the item and extended his hand inward with it. He's the one that did the transferring. And the other case is going to be of Eitzah. The Baal Bayis put something into this extended hand and the Ani took it out. So the Ani ends up having 2 cases of Achnasa and 2 cases of Eitzah, and the same for the Baal Bayis. He has 2 cases of Eitzah and 2 for Achnasa. Let's see what they are. The Baal Bayis picked up the item and removed it entirely himself. That's a case of Eitzah. Another case of Eitzah, let's do the Eitzahs together, is he lifted it up and extended his hand outwards. Didn't put it down, so it's only Usr, but that's a case for Eitzah. And then 2 cases of Achnasa is if he did the entire act of Achnasa, or if the Ani put something into his hand when it was extended outwards into Rosh Hashanah and the Baal Bayis brought it in. So the Baal Bayis has 2 cases of Eitzah and 2 of Achnasa. And the last and final question was that in the Sefer the cases are mixed together. Now they're not. Because let's see what the Sefer says. If the Ani picked up his hand and extended it inwards with an item, that's a case for the Ani, because he did the extending inwards with an item. Or the Baal Bayis put something into this extended hand and the Ani took it out. That's again a case for the Ani, because he's the one that moved it from one Rishus to another. So all three questions on Rashi fall aside based on the explanation of Riva. And now Tosfos presents a proof that Riva is correct. He brings a proof from the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that the Sefer only counts the cases that mirror in parallel the cases of the Reisha. And he explains the equivalent of the poor man doing Achnasa. That's the first case where the poor man lifted up the item and brought it in. The Yerushalmi says the equivalent of that is if he picked up the item and brought it in but didn't do the Hanacha. And the Yerushalmi continues and says, and the same thing for the Baal Bayis. The equivalent of doing the entire Malacha of Eitzah is when he picked it up and extended his hand outwards. So we see that the focus is that the extending of the hand also needs to be there in order to be considered one of the cases that are Asr. And Asri Bahu L'Dechi of Chatas. So to summarize, Tosfos said that Rashi gives one explanation for what the cases are for Asr Bahu L'Dechi of Chatas. It goes by the Akira. However, Tosfos had 3 reasons to disagree with Rashi, and therefore we presented the explanation of Riva that it's not the person who does the Akira, but rather it's the person who has the item in his hand when it's being moved from one Rishus to another. And based on that explanation, all 3 questions fall aside, and Tosfos also brought a proof of this from the Yerushalmi.